Hey, welcome back, everybody. Good Thursday, and I can't believe it's already Thursday, to be honest with you. It feels like, honestly, just quick ramble here at the start of the video. It feels like every time I blink, an entire week goes by. Like, I feel like it was just August, and then before that, I feel like it was just March, and before that, I feel like I was in high school. So it's going by quickly here, and I think 2024 is no different than the years before that have gone by very quickly. But yeah, here we are, already a Thursday and already to October 3rd. And with that, we do have some active weather that we need to discuss, including the potential of a couple hurricanes in the Atlantic. Also, the Gulf of Mexico has kind of gotten a little more quiet in terms of potential development. However, and this is a big however, I am just as, if not more, concerned for impacts into the state of Florida, specifically flooding impacts. And unfortunately, this has been the year of flooding with the tropics. We had record flooding with Debbie. We had potential tropical cyclone 8 that brought record flooding. And then obviously the disaster that Helene brought to western North Carolina as well. So it has really been quite the year here for flooding, unfortunately, and hopefully that's not a trend of things to come. Hopefully we can kind of calm it down a little bit. But unfortunately, I see the potential for another big time flooding event here through this weekend and through next week. So we're going to talk a lot about that. Also going to discuss what's going on in the lower 48. We do have our first, I think, big time fall cold front that we've seen in a while here. That we'll probably try to work on through here within the next couple of days, really within the next 5 days. And then we'll talk about the long range pattern as well. We're getting into that time of the year, and I tell you, I love long range forecasting. And when I say long range forecasting, I don't mean months ahead. I mean that kind of 8 to 15 day window during the winter and fall months. It's one of my favorite things to do with weather, even if we're not very good at it. It's a lot of fun. So again, I think wintertime is kind of when my channel is the most. I don't know, it's just when I have the most fun is during winter weather and forecasting that. We're getting close, which is good because I'm kind of tired of seeing the destruction from all these hurricanes and getting ready to start seeing some beautiful snowfall out there, which, albeit can be dangerous in its own way, but I think much less so than hurricanes and tornadoes, which is kind of what we've had to deal with for the past couple of months here. All right. If you haven't already subscribed, do so. Like the video, all the good stuff. Again, we're getting kind of close to 11,000 subscribers. Just hit 10,000 not long ago. So 11,000 is the next goal. So again, subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video. That'll help more people see it, and consider sharing it with somebody. And as always, comment. Let me know where you're watching from and if you have any cool weekend plans coming up. All right, here we go. We're taking a look at satellite. We've got a couple storms. This is Major Hurricane Kirk that I've circled here on the that kind of left circle there. And behind it, we have Tropical Storm Leslie. So both of these storms developed. We're starting to get through some of these names here. Again, probably not going to hit that hyperactive kind of numbers that some were expecting for this hurricane season, but nonetheless, a notable hurricane season with the number of storms we've seen, and definitely notable, obviously, with the impacts that we've seen, will be a year that's remembered for a long time. Now, other than those two storms, we do have some just organized showers and storms in the Gulf of Mexico that we're watching. Again, not really a big threat for a hurricane or anything of the sorts there, but I do think, or not even I do think, I do know we are going to see impacts from that either way through much of the Sunshine State, and we're going to talk pretty heavily on that. So again, that's down to a 30% chance of development, which is good. Obviously, we don't want another storm in the Gulf of Mexico. Luckily, a pretty good amount of wind shear kind of beating that down for us. And also the good news is we have kind of that cold front that's going to come through that's going to kind of stall it out here. Well, not good news for all of us. It's definitely not good news for Florida, but it's good for those of us in the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama. Again, going to prevent this from moving northward, but unfortunately going to bring even more enhanced rainfall through portions of the state of Florida. All right, again, Kirk, 120 mile an hour hurricane, and Leslie, a 40 mile an hour tropical storm. Both of these systems, luckily, are expected to turn out to sea with a bit of a comma here. Now, Kirk definitely not going to be a problem for anybody outside of some rough seas, maybe through the Caribbean, but again, no real impacts from that one. Behind it, Leslie, we're going to have to continue to watch because some of our models do try to keep it a little bit further south here, and we'll take a look at that. But let's start with the GFS, and we'll move this ahead pretty quick into time because honestly, not a lot to look at on the GFS. This is getting into this weekend, this Sunday. Kirk well on out of here, moving up and into the North Atlantic. Leslie behind it, now getting its act together, becoming a hurricane as well. Potentially a major hurricane, much like Kirk was. But on the GFS, you notice here, Leslie is just as excited about the idea of going out to sea and doesn't really cause any problems for anybody. And then by 10 days from now, we've got nothing in the main development region of the Atlantic, which is what you would expect for the middle of October. In fact, I don't want to write anything off here, but there's a chance these are the last two storms in the main development region of the Atlantic this hurricane season. Again, by 10 days from now, we're well into October, and it's already more uncommon to see storm formation in this part of the Atlantic during this time of year. But again, we do need to watch Leslie, and I'll show you why here. Latest European, well, let me back that up. It's kind of a bit of a spoiler alert there, sorry. So latest European model here, again, Kirk, no matter what, not going to be a problem. That's the storm you see out here to the north. Again, could continue to strengthen into a strong storm, but again, moving well away from any land. Even you folks in Bermuda, outside of rough seas, not going to be a problem there. Now, Leslie on the European model, though, is much further south with its track. And notice this, by the time we get to 18Z Thursday, or about Thursday afternoon Eastern time here, we've got, a major hurricane that's not that far from the greater or lesser Antilles here. And would be much closer to bringing direct impacts. Now, still doesn't on this model. You'll notice we pull it ahead and it still kind of gets pulled out to sea by an eventual cold front there. But much further south than the GFS. And then, of course, as I talked about, nothing else developing. The European does have a little bit of a wave here in about 7 to 10 days, but doesn't look super threatening by any means at this point. And again, that's so far down the road that we don't even really need to talk about it. So what's kind of the bottom line here? Well, take a look at the ensembles. The GFS ensembles, again, all of these are out to sea. There's maybe 3 members, we'll say 2 even, that keep this further south and would be a bigger threat to land. But obviously the GFS and its ensemble members are very caught up in the idea this is going out to sea, and hopefully it does. I think it's still the most likely possibility. But we take a look at the European, and you'll notice, again, just for reference here, kind of where we're at on the map, this is Puerto Rico. These are the Antilles, the British Virgin Islands, and all of those Caribbean island nations there. And we do have a big chunk of ensemble members here that get it much closer. In fact, about we'll say 2, maybe 3 of them bring it right over the Northern Islands and into Puerto Rico in about 10 days. So again, those 2 are obviously outliers. That's maybe, if we put every ensemble together from both models, that gives this maybe a 5 to 10% chance of hitting the islands. So obviously not very high. As again, just about all members curve this out to sea. But even if we get some of these tracks that are close, but don't quite make landfall, we would see much higher impacts with any sort of major hurricane. So need to watch out for that for sure. But again, I still think most likely scenario is this goes out to sea and won't really be a problem for anybody. And we'll hope that that's the case. And again, I think that is still the most likely scenario here as well. All right, quick coffee break there. And by the way, if I seem a little down and out of it today, I woke up with quite a headache this morning, but luckily, I think the caffeine and the ibuprofen and the water I'm drinking is starting to kick in. And hopefully we'll start to get a bit better here, because Thursdays are long for me and I got a lot to do today. So again, nothing I hate more than a headache. Well, I take that back. There's a lot of things I hate more than a headache, but a headache's pretty high on the list. So anyway, enough about me. Taking a look at the weather here through the Gulf of Mexico. Again, a lot of showers, a lot of thunderstorm activity out here, specifically towards the Bay of Campeche. Over the next couple of days. And you'll notice, again, the big question has been, is this going to develop into a named storm? Are we going to get Milton out of this? And I think right now it's looking less and less likely this develops. Now, it could still develop, but if it does, even then, I think I'm sticking with a high end being an upper end tropical storm to maybe a very low end hurricane. But again, most likely scenario is just kind of a mess out here of thunderstorm activity. And you'll notice it tries to develop here. This is early this coming week. This is Monday evening. We do have low pressure here on the GFS trying to get its act together in the central Gulf of Mexico, but really struggling to do much here. And it kind of just meanders around and it just, something I'll note here. It's almost like this area is shooting off a gun of vorticity, to be honest. So kind of watch what happens here. And this is why I am concerned about flooding through the state of Florida. Here's kind of this big, broad area of low pressure. Again, kind of this general Central American gyre-ish setup. and watch what happens. It'll be hard to see, but you'll get like one little piece of low pressure that shoots off out of it. Again, you'll notice here's one that kind of comes out of it, and then we'll move this further ahead into time, and you'll get another. And look at kind of what happens here by the time we're getting basically a week from right now. We've got just a bunch of little areas of enhanced vorticity. And what this does is, yeah, it could increase winds a little bit, but more importantly, it's going to increase the lift and increase rainfall rates here through portions of Florida. And, you get a bunch of these after one another, and then just the stalled out front over the state. I'm still moving this ahead in time. This is 10 days out. It's still raining over portions of the state of Florida. So I am legitimately concerned about a flooding threat here. And we take a look at the European model. It's really more of the same, just this big mess of low pressure. A whole lot of rain through the Sunshine State, specifically the I-4 corridor southbound, I think. Really, we'll say the I-10 corridor south to play it safe here. Again, a lot of rain with some enhanced areas of vorticity that bring enhanced rainfall. And it just seems like low pressure really just wants to stay into the Gulf of Mexico for the extended range. So could something, form here over the next 10 days? Again, still a very real possibility, but we're definitely shifting towards a scenario where flooding is the biggest threat. And again, I keep showing you the ensembles. It's really just a mess. On the GFS, just look at what happens. You get low pressure to form, and it just meanders here. This is 10 days out. You're just getting loops and loops, and pieces of vorticity, again, kind of get shot off towards the state of Florida here. And again, that's going to increase rainfall rates, even if nothing develops out of it. And the European, I will mention, we would prefer the European here. Obviously, you got a couple members that are a bit stronger, but it's at least a little quicker with getting this over Florida and out of here compared to stalling out kind of like the GFS does. Although both models do stall out and bring a lot of rain. And we can take a look at those rainfall totals here in a second, but let's time it out for you just a tad bit more here for you folks in the Sunshine State. Again, well, let me see if I can get this to work. Sorry. As early as potentially really starting now onward, we're going to have on and off rain chances. This is tomorrow afternoon for Friday. You'll notice some rain through Florida. We get this into the weekend. Saturday, again, scattered rain. Sunday, scattered rain. But I think it's really Sunday into early next week. This rain becomes much more widespread. This is Monday afternoon. Look at that heavy rain over Florida, specifically South Florida, Tampa, Fort Myers, Port Charlotte there. And it just stays there, wave after wave after wave of heavy rainfall next week. This is getting into Wednesday, into Thursday, into Friday. Then we clear out a little bit by next weekend, but don't get too excited because then more waves kind of move in here by next weekend and later on. Again, this is getting more than 10 days out, so unreliable for exact details, but you get the point here. A mix of a whole bunch of vorticity and a stalled out front could bring big time, and I do mean big time rainfall totals. Latest GFS, we've got places getting more than 20 inches of rain here over the next 10 days. And the one bit of good news is Florida's used to heavier rain. They can handle it a little bit more than some other states. Obviously 30 inches of rain in the mountains was catastrophic, and it would be really bad in Florida too. It's just the way the state is built. A lot of it's kind of swampy anyway, so there's more places for this water to flow out. But either way, this would still be a lot of rain that would bring a lot of flooding issues. So I need you folks in Florida, especially south of the I-10 corridor, especially I-4 corridor southbound here, to be monitoring this because, again, we saw what happened in North Carolina multiple times, and we saw what happened with Debbie in South Carolina. We've seen plenty of flooding events this year, and unfortunately, you could kind of really be the next in line here for a potential flood. So just be prepared for that and keep coming back for those details. All right, watches, warnings, advisories, radar imagery, and actually, you know what? Let's see. Can we loop this? Is this going to loop well? Let's see. I've never tried to loop this map. Yeah, it's moving. It's not moving very quick. Okay, we can do this 2 times speed. Let's do 3 times speed. Oh, is it moving? I don't know. Anyway, okay. So you get the point here. A lot of rain in places. Okay, I think it's looping now. But overall speaking, pretty quiet. We do have this little thin area of some shower activity along the Dakota border here. Nothing out of the world here. Again, just some showers kind of moving on through. We can handle that for sure. We do have, again, some rain down into Florida already, again, due to this low pressure system, but a lot of it's staying over the Gulf currently. Other rain elsewhere on the map here up into Canada. Again, there's kind of this big swath where we've had some storms cross through the southern tier of Canada where, most people live anyway. So you folks watching up into Canada could be seeing some rain out there. Back up towards, let's see if I can find some cities here. Calgary, Edmonton, Red Deer, Canada, Regina, that area up through kind of Saskatchewan. And then back out into eastern Canada, some showers as well. But in terms of watches, warnings, and advisories in the east, we had some fog this morning, so that's what most of these alerts are. Obviously, still river flooding ongoing as all of that water rushes down from the mountains into the seas. So again, could be seeing just a little bit of some river flooding in that area, so be mindful. Out west, up into the northern plains and into the northern Rockies, a big-time windstorm on the way here soon for you. High wind warnings up into effect. That should really begin to pick up tomorrow through this region, and we'll kind of take a look at that a little bit as well. And then we've got excessive heat warnings and heat advisories into the desert southwest. It has been hot and will continue to be hot here through the near future. Now, next 48 hours through the lower 48, specifically the east, not a whole lot going on. This afternoon, a couple showers are possible here, I think, into the western Carolinas. We've got just a little bit of onshore flow that could potentially, pop up some showers into this region. Not anything severe, not expecting flooding threat. But again, if you're in that region, a lot of folks still are without power here through the western Carolinas. Luckily, my parents back home did get power back pretty quickly, but I've got plenty of other family I know and friends that are still without power a week later now, just about. And still picking up the pieces there. So again, hoping that this rain doesn't kind of overperform, but again, I'm not expecting a lot out of it outside of some showers this afternoon and overnight tonight through the mountains. You'll see some showers, but again, this isn't going to re-cause any flooding by any means. This is just going to kind of be a bit of a Debbie Downer on the mood. Now, by the time we're getting into tomorrow afternoon, more widespread showers here through the coastal regions of the southeast, specifically Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and up through coastal Georgia and South Carolina. Could see some afternoon thunderstorms and heavy rainfall. Again, all of that coastal precipitation just kind of hanging around, and still some mountain showers tomorrow afternoon as well and into the evening. And you'll even notice by the time we start the weekend here, overnight Saturday, a good little band of some rain up here through Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. Again, that's kind of the start of our front that's going to bring some nicer weather through the region. So definitely dodging a little bit of rain here through the next couple of days, but not anything we haven't dealt with before and nothing that we can't handle. Out west, a beautiful day today. Again, no rain in sight, but by the time we get into tomorrow, specifically early tomorrow morning, and I'll remind you, the time you see at the top is in Eastern time. It's just the way the website works. I can't fix it, but it's fine. Again, this website does a lot for us. So again, shout out to Tropical Tidbits. But again, a front moving through there. A lot of rain through the Seattle area here Friday morning and into the afternoon. That works on through the Pacific Northwest. Scattered showers up through Idaho, back towards Missoula, Montana. Seeing some scattered showers here potentially by the time we get into our evening and overnight hours of Friday. But then that will kind of dissipate here through the weekend. All right, let's talk about kind of the fun stuff. What's coming on down the pipeline? What about this fall weather? Well, 500 millibar height anomaly map here does a pretty good job at showing it here from the European. Right now, still kind of stuck in this ridge through much of the east, and then just dealing with a lot of zonal flow here over the northern tier of the country, which indicates to me that kind of our polar front, or where we're getting that fall weather and our winter weather, is kind of set up right into this region. So again, you see how the isobars are curving here, and we have this very tight thickness gradient up into this region. That tells me, as somebody forecasting, that, well, again, relatively zonal flow, but all of this fall air is trapped up into Canada right now. But notice what happens here as we move this ahead into time. We kind of get more meridional flow. We get one little dip into the northeast this weekend, but behind it is the bigger dip. This is the Big Dipper, if you will. I really crack myself up, don't I? But again, the cooler air there. So you'll notice our polar front sags south. And when I say polar, I don't mean this is Arctic air. There's two types of fronts in meteorology whenever it comes to cold air. We have polar air and then Arctic air. Arctic air is that kind of, as funnily as it's going to sound, I'm going to contradict myself, but that Arctic air is more about when you hear about the polar vortex coming during the winter. That's Arctic air. Polar air is just more of any kind of air that is cooler than it should be, air that really originates from Canada, and then Arctic air, well, originates from the Arctic. So again, polar air, or we'll call it fall air in this case. We get that big dip though, and look at this blue swinging on through the northern tier of the country. We get it in the Dakotas, Minnesota, up through the northern Great Lakes, through eastern Canada, and then watch what happens. Big time dip of this blue going into early next week. This is next Tuesday. A whole lot of fall air, and notice this is getting all the way down into the southeast. Unfortunately for you folks out west, that big ridge kind of buckles northward as this trough buckles southward through the east. So again, what goes up must come down. But I think much of the east is going to get in on much nicer fall temperatures next week. And notice how this kind of hangs around for a little bit. And then maybe 10 days from now lightens up a little bit. But a good shot of cold air. And with that, we will have to we will have to deal with a little bit of thunderstorm activity, specifically here through the northern plains and into the northern Great Lakes. This is Saturday evening. Again, here's our storm system forming along that trough, which you would expect. Now, in front of that, kind of here where this cold front is, we are seeing some shower and storm activity. So maybe a couple severe storms through Minnesota, Wisconsin, into Michigan going into the weekend. But then that front kind of weakens a little bit and just brings some showers through the northeast and mid-Atlantic by the time we get into early next week. But then dives southward. Here comes that nicer air, and you'll notice these red lines. Notice how they're buckling like this. Well, let me draw it a little bit better for you. These red lines, how they're buckling generally like this. Again, that tells me that cold fall air or cool fall air is simmering southward here. And even look at this 540 line getting down here. This is the first visit from the 540 line so far this year for a lot of us, just meaning kind of where's it cold enough to snow if rain was falling. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple snow showers into the higher terrains of the northeast out of this during the middle of next week. Maybe a little bit of snowleage, just meaning some snowfall and fall foliage for you folks. Yeah, so again, a nice transition to fall here, and you can really see it on the dew point map. Not overbearingly muggy for many of us right now, but definitely not fall-like by any means. But here comes that dry air. Again, one shot this weekend with a weaker front up through the northeast. You're kind of going to get a tease beforehand, but here comes the bigger shot of dry air. This is next Monday, working on through, and by the time we get to next Tuesday, many of us getting in on dew points back down into the 50s and 40s. We move this really far ahead into time by next Thursday. I mean, we're really, feeling like fall, even down into South Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. And then, unfortunately, you folks in Florida, the flooding threat continues and even probably gets enhanced a little bit by this front. But nonetheless, much nicer fall-like conditions here about a week or so from now, but even less than that. Really, as early as next Tuesday, I think we'll start to feel it. Temperature-wise, excuse me, currently relatively muggy, not feeling the best out there, but here comes that blue again taking over. This is next Tuesday afternoon. A lot of blue here east of the Mississippi, but you'll notice it's not overly cold. I mean, this is definitely a cold front, and you'll notice, again, this blue works through or maybe 5-10 degrees below average by this time next week, and that stays there for a little bit. But the more important thing here is, I think, that dry air. Now, again, temperatures will be below average, but we're not talking 20, 30 degrees below average. Again, this isn't an Arctic front. This is just kind of a nice fall front that's going to cool things out. But again, we're getting into the middle of October here, so 10 degrees below average, that's going to start getting to sweater weather here during the mornings and just start to overall feel a lot nicer. All right, let's talk about even a little bit further out there. I mean, when are we really going to switch to fall here? Well, look at the 500 millibar height anomaly map, same map I just showed you. This is a week from now or so. Again, you notice these blues here into the northeast kind of dipping down into the east, bringing some nicer fall air. As for you folks in the plains and out west, I mean, just a big old ridge. It's been hot. It's going to continue to be hot. Sorry. I just give you the news, whether it's good or bad. But you'll notice even further out here, this is getting, to the middle of October here, and the European and the GFS and its ensemble members really keep this blue over the east. So we could see a kind of a prolonged switch to fall here through the month of October here, and I can't think of a better time to do it. After the absolute disasters that we've had to deal with in the southeast weather-wise, I think we're due for a nice break. Look at this. Again, the next 6 to 10 days is going to be below average, but even 8 to 14 days, much of the east here, specifically through the Appalachia chain, eastbound here, a high probability of below average temperatures, and it's going to be dry too, which isn't great for everybody. We are dealing with some drought in the country, but for us in the Carolinas, up into the east where we've seen a lot of rain, again, really, truly a gift from God here. And generally the way the weather works, what goes up must come down. So it can't stay bad forever. And the same goes for life, I think, too. So that's my inspirational spiel here at the end. it can't stay bad forever. There's always light at the end of the tunnel, and the same goes for the weather here. Fall weather coming here pretty quickly. So again, you folks in Florida though, stay tuned. I need you to keep watching for that potential of flooding. But this nice flip to fall is on the way, and hopefully we start breaking down some winter storms here in the next couple of weeks, especially by the time we get into November. Should really start to see an increase in that winter activity. So, all right, folks, have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you all tomorrow.